Hey everybody, welcome back to Old World Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
Magical Evan.
Well, somewhat magical. I guess it
Yeah.
depends on the day and such. So, today we wanted to dive into the magic, in particular, what we've seen, the updates from 1.5, and just kind of walk everybody through our impressions of them and what we've seen working, what we've seen changed, what we see people are taking. We didn't really want to get into this right away at first because it was a whole bunch of conjecture, right? We didn't really know. But now that since the updates have been out, right, we've run an RTT and now we've run our 2 day latest event, our GT at Palm Springs Open. So now
Yes.
we've seen a large number of games of the community between those two events. I don't know, 30, 40 plus games at this point. So we really have actually quite a bit more than that. We've seen quite
Yeah.
a few games now that we've seen the 1.5 updates. Really, really happy in general with it. But I guess let's start from there, Evan. I think the biggest thing, right, of course, right, there's Vortex changes, right?
Yes.
We wizard levels in terms of how casting are changes, a few power level changes, things like the Ruby Ring change, right? There's quite a few things that individually they might not seem big, but when you add it all up, it really feels like a whole reboot on Magic, doesn't it?
It definitely does. So with the previous paradigm, essentially, not only did you only want to take a level 4, because if the other person had one, then they would stop all your spells with anyone who wasn't a level
Yeah.
4. But at the same time, you also felt like if you didn't take a level 4, you were just so outmatched by just being constantly be stopped or shut down all the time, because they would always get their spells off, and the only thing to stop it was a dispeller. So you felt kind of
Yeah.
very locked in to the 1 plus level 4 restriction, and nothing could be further from how it plays now. That is not how it works. One of my most important pieces in my latest tournament Beastman list was a level 1 Viletide guy who ends up getting a +3 to cast most of the time. But like, so they've really reset the magical scales in terms of the
Hmm.
dispelling. That's probably the number one thing. It used to be a game of, we'll see what I roll and we'll see what you roll. Maybe I'll dispel you. And now it's a game of, oh, I tried to cast that and it didn't go off. Cool. Or I did go off and almost never the person dispels it. So it's having like a dispel threat now is way less of an auto include than it used to be. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's nowhere near as an auto success that someone's going to cast Miles Barrage 5 times in a row on your Chaos Dragon if you didn't have someone to dispel with, right?
Yeah, it is such a big shift. You don't think about it like it's like, oh well, it's only the difference of +1 to cast or +2 to cast. That sounds so minor. But when we're talking about, for the most part, the scale of the stats in the old world, right, are typically ranging from that 1 to 10, or with the two dice often 1 to 12 range. So it actually is a huge factor when you think about it. That's almost, a 20% to 40% delta, right? Or right, or 15% to 30% delta relative to, whether you're on the scale 1 to 10, 1 to 12 and such. But those are huge numbers, absolutely huge numbers. And exactly right. It definitely felt like before that you had to have a level 4, not even because you necessarily needed to get off spells relative to what you're playing, but it felt like a must that you had to have a level 4 to dispel your opponent. And even though there was magic resistance in the game,
Yeah.
quite frankly, even a level magic MR2 was not enough to stop those level 4s that constantly had +1, where we constantly saw level 4s casting at +5. You just had absolutely no hope of stopping that. And they pretty much got everything off all the time. So this is a pretty huge shift. And I'm personally really excited about it. We've definitely seen that not just in Evan's list, but a lot of the players out there. We never saw ever before level 1s and levels 2s. Well, people would try them once and realize, oh, that was worthless, and they never take them again because they get so outclassed by the level 4s. There was no point. But
Mm-hmm.
interesting enough, I'm not seeing a lot of level 3s. I have seen level 1s, I have seen level 2s, I have seen level 4s. It
Really?
feels like players are,
Well, the
I
two
think more
winning
of, they're
lists
like,
of
hey,
Palm
we're going to go
Spring
level
Open.
3.
Yeah,
Hmm?
the two winning lists of Palm Spring Open were both level 3 archmages because they didn't have the points
Now
to
that
buy
was
the fourth.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't because they were specifically buying the mages. They were buying the dragons. So I think that was the
But
difference of there. They
I
couldn't
think that
upgrade the
either of
dragons, of
those two
course.
players could have brought two princes on Star Dragons with no mage instead, if they had wanted to.
They
So
could
that
have,
would have
but I
been an
think they
option.
preferred having the magic variety. Again, we'll have to do an interview with them soon to figure that out. But
Yeah.
that's definitely an exception. But besides those lists, not seeing a ton of it. But we are still seeing level 4s, right? But we're
Hmm.
also seeing the level 1s and level 2s now, and they're actually able to compete to a degree with those level 4s.
Yes. One of the first things is that since you're going to have multiple wizards, they might just be out of the bubble arc of whatever wizard, right? So they won't
Hmm.
be able to dispel you. And then the second thing is if they're only one higher base to try to stop you from your spell, then that's not that much, essentially.
Nope.
And it's, you know, and then if, for example, I think that the lower level wizards are an amazing way to basically back yourself up when you are relying on a specific signature spell. Because if you have a level 4, he can't take the same signature spell 4 times, unless if you're
Right.
Cathay.
Well, that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but normally if you want to have a bunch of the same signature spell or a bunch of your different signature spells, you're gonna have multiple wizards, and what does
Hmm.
it matter which level they are if they're just trying to roll pretty much the same numbers on the 2 dice anyway. The reason why the only 2 pips of bonus or cast or dispel makes such a big difference is because the 2d6 scale is a bell curve, but it's a bell curve where if you shift 2 segments over to the left, it drops the percent chance of something happening by like 30%. It goes from a 92% chance to get a certain thing off to going to like a 61% chance. So, and that's just from 2 points difference in terms of the casting value. Now, I personally would say that I would love for the next edition of Magic in Old World 2.0 to have some way for you to roll 3 dice, either some of the time, once per turn, something like that, because I think a 3d6 distribution scale it has more room to grow as opposed to a 2d6 scale, which is very fixated on every individual point you can get to bonus it, right? Um, and so that would be really exciting, as well as the idea that if you rolled 3 dice to cast a spell, you would have more chance to actually miscast. I find that in Old World, the fact that miscasting is practically unheard of is kind of really weird.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, the miscasts happen, and they certainly happen, enough. I think the biggest difference is the miscast table is significantly more forgiving than it was in previous editions by
that's true.
quite a bit. And so, right, versus where a cannon blows up, if you roll a misfire in a war machine, right, if you roll a 1, you're just dead flat
Yeah,
out. So, ooh, that's bad. If you roll a 6, okay, 1 in 6 chance, you just don't fire this turn. I'm like, okay, that's a moderate miscast, but 2 to 5 is still pretty punishing because you're not only firing this turn, you're not firing next turn. So the wizards don't have anything like that. Of course, there's a lot of reasons for that, but with the way the game plays out. But to your point, those more consequential hurt yourself things. At the same time, it's also super not fun to spend a whole bunch 300 plus points on a level 2-step wizard and have him roll a miscast instantly and he's eliminated from the game. That's also not fun. But I do agree that in general, it does feel that the miscast chart could be a little bit more punishing than it is. I don't really want it to be significantly more punishing, but I don't feel it's rare to see a player say, maybe I shouldn't cast that spell, right? Like, I just don't see them making that choice because the risks are so lightweight. Like, okay, maybe I'll take a wound, who cares, right? Or maybe I'll
yeah.
hurt some of the models in my unit. It's not preventing them from doing that. Versus sometimes in the war machine, you're like, you do, I could blow my. There's a significantly higher risk, and I think that is one thing that is missing from the edition right now. And we'll see if that's something they readdress in the future.
Yeah, I'll basically all I'm trying to say is that if there was a way to roll two or so in previous editions you would have some pool of power dice and you get to pick how many dice you wanted to throw at an individual spell. Now that was
Yeah, more
really
choice.
abusable when you said, "Cool, I have only one spell I care about. I'm going to throw all 7 dice at that one spell. Good luck dispelling my 35 to cast or something." That's
Yep,
dumb.
pretty
But
silly.
I do think that if there was a core rule of the game that you could essentially either once per turn or once per game or something roll 3 dice instead of 2, it would give people a more approachable idea of how to engage with the magic. Where currently I think it's a very high skilled player thing to do is to take power scrolls because you have to afford the extra slots in your
Yep.
character. You have to have the wizard points or whatever. But if you bring those power scrolls, there will be a time in the game where a high skilled player knows this is when the spell needs to go off. I need to use the power scroll now. Tell your opponent you're using the power scroll, and then you roll those 3 dice. And it's really fun to have the third die because then it introduces a much different distribution curve of results. Whereas 2d6 plus some flat number is always the same curve with just a left shift. That's it. So
Hmm.
2d6 plus 5 because I'm mortuary cult, or 2d6 plus 2 because my guy's standing near a forest. That's the same curve. It's no different, right?
Yep. That's true, but that is future speculation or
Yeah.
what could potentially happen in the future. So let's talk more about the 1.5. So exciting to see level ones and level twos. So what have you been seeing, Evan, with out there? Are you seeing the level ones or level twos primarily just taking signature spells? Are you seeing them? I know in the past we would often see players put ruby rings on them, but that's not as much now. I'm seeing them on other characters. What are generally you seeing players partake
So
to the event?
somebody pointed it out recently in a discussion I was having, and I realized, oh, that is true. They didn't lower the casting values of any of the magic missiles in the game. None of the magic missile spells were lowered. So if you are
Yep.
casting, it used to be +4, now you're +2. Well, that just means that whatever you had to roll before, you have to roll higher than you used to get a magic missile off
Yep.
because none of them were lowered. Um, Now some of them are still pretty low. Like Viletide is actually an 8+ to go off, which is one of the reasons why it's so incredibly good. It is not very high to
Yep.
roll, and that's why a level 1, even with just, for example, you could take the Jagged Dagger to, you can kill a model to get +1 to cast while you're on that specific roll, or you can use like the Dark Coven rule, or you can stand next to the Herdstone that every single Breed Spin player is going to bring to eventually get that level 1 up to like 3 or 4 to cast, right? And that's pretty useful. I will say, Mike, that the trend is not necessarily that someone will bring 3 level 1s by themselves. It's more often that someone will either bring a lot of magic, like my Primal Herd list with a level 4 and a level 1, or or for example, Greg's list that we saw when the San Diego RTT, he had like 3 level 1s or level
He
2s,
did.
and his
Hmm.
2 level 4 wizards. But the trend is even more to be, okay, well, I think my army doesn't want to use magic at all, and I think that, for example, like my friend Andres, this is Demons of Chaos, or Demons of Khorne. Really recently, he brought the Bloodthirster and a bunch of Bloodletters and didn't bring any wizards. And a lot of people play that exact list, except that they do bring a Tzeentch, a Demon Prince, along with it to just have a
Hmm.
Dispeller. That was a pretty common build before. But now it's
Hmm.
like, maybe I just won't do that. That's fine.
Yeah, and we definitely see that with some other lists where people would never, honestly, they really weren't competitive before. The known list where you're not getting a wizard, or the Empire. What was the other? The Cavalry list where you had all that anti-magic resistance, but it just wasn't enough. Even magic resistance 2 on your whole army. Someone's rocking a level 4 with +5, or whatever to cast. They were still going to get pretty much everything off no matter what. But now that you're only getting on average +2 or +3 to cast, we'll leave the Beastman issue separately to the side. I believe
Yeah, there are
personally that was an
two armies
oversight.
that kind of break the rules. There's the Wild Herd
Yes.
and there's the Mortuary Cult.
Yep. So I'm hopeful that GW will address those in the future because I believe that's an oversight, that they allow them to still get significantly higher than that +1 modifier to their casting. But maybe not. Maybe that is totally intentional. I don't know because they haven't told us.
So with Mortuary Cult, it's more limited than it ever was before, and they can only do it like once per turn. And the same thing is true of the
Yep.
Beastmen. It's just that in the Beastmen, there used to be this downside in the original rules they printed that it would be miscast on any double. So if I roll a double 3, I miscast, and they actually removed that in the updated
Yep.
rules. And so I think it's fine that certain armies have a better bonus to cast, but because we talked again about having the same curve, where even just I have 1 higher than you, puts me at like a 12 to 15% better chance of getting my spell off, it becomes a point where there's the haves and the have-nots, and there are certain armies in the game that have really great magic, and there's other armies that don't. And some of those armies are like, for example, the Ogre Kingdoms, which I also play, are going to go, you know what? I'm not taking a wizard. Screw that. That's so many points. I'm not spending my points on that. I'm spending them on something else.
Yeah, there are a lot of points, and I think we definitely saw PSO more magic resistance than we had seen at different events.
Yes.
I definitely noticed in my games significantly less magic missiles going off than before. That was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a thing. Also, the ruby ring right before that was constantly going off, and that just the fact that it's 1 less plus to cast
Yes.
now, the fact that that got nerfed. It used to be an auto include, and I think a lot of lists people who were typically always taking it still took it at the PSO, and it just didn't go off over half the time. At least in my experiences, it was a significant nerf, and I think they're going to
Thank
reevaluate.
God.
Is this an auto? I don't think it's an auto include anymore. I think players are going to second guess whether it's worth that points, or to your point, whether they take those wizards at all, or maybe they just take a lower level wizard. Right? It's like, well, I was primarily taking that level 4 before for defense, not so much for offense. Honestly, I could probably get away with a level 1, for some defense, or maybe they could take 2 level 1s for still less points and spread them out across the table. I think that's an interesting thing we're seeing too. I think the very common before we only ever saw one wizard in most lists, and it was one level 4. Now that we're seeing this lower threshold, we are seeing more often 2 or 3 wizards in lists, which I think a big difference too is they're spreading out, so they have more potential to zone out dispel ranges.
Yeah. Well, you keep trying to bring it up, and I keep talking about something else. You bringing up the vortex changes. I kind of think that the vortex changes, the primary one is to pillar of fire, that you can't choose to the direction you're moving it. I don't know if that
Mm,
would have mattered as much anymore now that you get to have such an easier time dispelling it when you're within range of the vortex itself. But again, vortexes are harder to get rid of because your dispel value is not +4 anymore, and the
right.
number of
Hmm.
casting value for a lot of the vortexes stayed the same. So, in other words, a lot of times the vortex, as long as you get to get it off once, it just stays there, which is actually a really cool vibe for the game because you can bring a level 1 wizard with a power scroll and just try to get them to cast their signature vortex spell, and then
Hmm.
that's the only thing they did. And they just got that vortex onto the table, and then they hung out in the back after that. And sure, you can still try to dispel the vortex from the vortex measurement that you could do, but if it's a spiritual vortex, I think it's an 11 plus to get rid of that. And even if you
Yeah.
can only have a +2 to get rid of that, or +2 to dispel,
I can't recall if that reduced to 10 or not, but to your point, it is harder
yeah,
to dispel them.
it
Absolutely.
reduced
And
the
I
casting
definitely
value to
saw in my
10,
case.
but the dispel is still, that means the dispel is 11, and if I only have a plus
That's right, because you
two,
still have to beat it. Yeah,
right,
it's a lot harder to get that off, even with the +2 is significantly harder. So
yeah,
we saw less of them being cast. They were almost auto cast before. They're now not. But to Evan's point, once you get them off, before in the previous before 1.5, they were pretty much dispelled almost instantly, unless the wizard was playing runaway and you couldn't catch the wizard, which quite frankly was not fun for anybody.
exactly.
This is significantly better, but they do, like, I had several games where vortexes, even attempting to dispel them on either side, were staying in play for several turns, which that really changed a lot of things because all of a sudden now, like, hey, there's a problem. That thing is in the way. Before it was just an auto, oh yeah, okay, it hits me once, it moves once, and I dispel it, it's gone. But now they're
Yeah, right.
constantly staying on the battlefield, and they're. I think it's not that their damage output is significantly increased; it's that their board control and zone influence, what they're affecting on terms of movement, is significantly higher now.
Yeah, and the fact that people take the damage that the vortex normally does when they walk over it is pretty cool. I think that feels
Yes.
better. What happened before was that if unit of like 30 peasants walked over a pillar of fire, instead of just taking D3+3 hits, every single peasant had to try to roll not roll a 1 or they were dead. And then in the
Hmm.
meantime, if a dragon walks over it, they just roll a single die, and even if they do roll a 1, they only lose 1 of their 9 wounds. So it
Yeah.
just made certain units in the game really not like walking through dangerous terrain when other ones didn't care at all. And now the vortexes are instead just doing their regular amount of damage, which can be more or less damaging to specific units based on
Hmm.
that theme of the vortex. So like spiritual vortex, pretty decent at hitting knights if they walk over it, right? Stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
What I really love is the black horror vortex from Dark Elves. If it doesn't hit you, because it does move randomly, but if you do walk
Yep.
over it, then it does this D6 strength tests, and then you just lose a wound if you fail a strength test, which is pretty cool. I like that one a lot.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think a biggest thing for me in terms of the last 5, 6, 7 games I've played, they didn't auto take battle magic. I think that was
Mm.
huge. Like, just the fact that Pillar of Fire, you can't control where it goes. People still are taking battle magic. It's still a good lore, but it used to be almost an auto select lore. At least three quarters of my games, the opponent would take battle magic simply because they're hoping for Pillar of Fire and to use it in the way that it was just not a great
And
mechanic. It
arcane
was just too
urgency.
abusive. Yeah, an arcane urgency. But now, after these changes, this weekend or the last weekend at PSO, I didn't run into it once.
Well, that's true. Battle magic doesn't happen as often. Arcane urgency is still very difficult to cast with even higher values now. However, that does represent
Yes,
how good that spell is because when you can make your
very
dragon
good.
march 40 inches, that is a big freaking deal. Especially
Hmm.
when you, because again, we still have the problem that Magic kind of had in the original edition, which is that because the dispel range is 24 inches, very very likely the first player who goes can cast all of their enchantments, hexes, and conveyance spells without having anyone within dispel range at all, right?
Yes.
So when they
Mhm.
were even more likely to go off, it's cool. On my turn, I'm gonna Arcane Urgency, I'm gonna Oaken Shield, I'm gonna Steed of Shadows, I'm gonna do whatever I want to do, and then I'll walk into Dispel range, and then you get to not do what you want to do on your turn. And that, personally, I feel it was messed up. But now, at the very least, it's not so much about being in Dispel range anymore. It's just maybe they just don't roll high enough, right?
Yeah.
Um, And so I'm actually ready to call it, Mike. Before 1.51, the best three lores of magic in the game were Battle Magic, Elementalism, and Illusion. And Battle Magic lost the Pillar of Fire ability, and Arcane is harder to
It
get off
did.
now. So
Yep.
I don't know.
All
It's
true.
looking a little bit rocky. And then we've got Illusion, where Miasma Barrage is incredibly high casting value. And if you do take a lore familiar on your wizard, it means you probably didn't take some item that lets you have a plus to cast now, or something like that.
Hmm.
But usually it's one or the other. And so I don't think
Okay.
illusion is really showing up very much at all. And in particular, Spectral
No.
Doppelganger, when you only have, let's say, a +2 to cast and you have to roll a 7 on the dice, when
Hmm.
people are bringing magic resistance a lot more, that's just never gonna freaking happen anymore. Like the Vampire Lord with
Hmm.
Doppelganger, I just don't see that being the
No.
spending
Well, it
all the
was already
points to do
hard to get
that.
that off before.
It was
That's
hard to
right.
get out
It
before, and
was
now it'll be
already.
harder. Yeah,
Now it's significantly harder.
yeah,
I have seen, and I thought it was great, and it got asked multiple times where a wizard was in combat and a spell was being cast at the wizard or the unit. It's like, yes, you can defend yourself now. Yay, you can dispel something
that's
if you're being
cool.
targeted.
Yeah,
That was super cool, and it just made them everyone happy. And the opponent said, "Yep, that makes sense." Right? It just felt right. It just felt better. So, I mean, in general, I'm feeling great about these updates. Are they perfect? No, but I think there are exceptionally
right.
great changes in the right direction. I think it feels a lot better. I'm excited to see more varieties in the ones and twos. We're seeing a mix up of the spell lores. I know you're saying you're ready to call, Evan. I don't know actually. For me, I'm not sure what the top lores are now at this point, but they are definitely reset. So you
I can
wanna
tell
take
you.
a guess at this point? Okay, here's Evan's statements. In what are we? The beginning of August. What
Well,
are they? The best lores now?
yeah, well, so first of all, if you're just being and again, one of the lores is highly dependent on what your FAQ specifically is around Earth and Ramparts. So we'll talk about that in a second. But unfortunately for me, because I find it incredibly boring, Elementalism is still the best lore in the game. I think it was before. It was actually better than Battle Magic. It was just harder to use. Elementalism is very, very good, and we'll explain that in a second. But then we have two other slots in the top three, and I don't think Battle and Illusion make it there anymore. I think that the two that make it there are Demonology and High Magic, and I'll explain why in a second. Now, one of the main reasons why I think the lores have shaken up is that whenever you're casting a spell that's like a hex or a magic missile, you have to target the other person's units. So you have to have range, you have to have line of sight or arc of sight, and you have to be able
Yep.
to roll higher than whatever their magic resistance is to actually have that spell
Yep.
do anything. Now, with High Magic and Demonology, you have way more of your useful spells are enchantments or things that you're going to be casting on your own units. That means no magic resistance. There's not going to be a -2 from a Brazen Collar of Corn or a -2
Hmm.
from having a Rune Lord in a certain unit. So you're not trying to cast things against the other person. You're casting on your own units, and you can build those synergies into your list. Those lores were sitting very much under the best lores in the game before because magic missiles just went off all the time. Hexes went off all the time. So who cares? You can just use, elementals and battle magic stuff like that, and with impunity. But now I think when you have to roll against your own units, I think that those other lores become a lot better. So that's what I'm definitely saying right now. The top three lists at PSO were two players who played high magic on a dragon that could have been using, for example, a reserve move and ethereal to make one of the dragons just immune to any and all shooting, for example, like cannonballs,
Hmm.
while it could walk
Hmm.
forward, breathe fire on people, and then reserve move backwards. And fire convocation, amazing spell for saying, oh, you have like 30 night goblins because you got really excited about the infantry changes. Cool, let me kill all of them with one spell. That's freaking hilarious. I love that.
It's very
um,
powerful.
yeah. And then we have Demonology, where I think Steed of Shadows is one of the best spells in the game. Because now that infantry is just like, yeah, charge me. I don't care, bro. Steed of Shadows is great for just flying troops into the enemy backline or making a very large, powerful brick get to exactly where you need it to be. Awesome.
Hmm.
I think every single game I played where I did have Steed of Shadows in the tournament, I was doing way better when I didn't have it. And the same thing is true for Demonic Vessel, where if the other player said, hey, you know what, I don't want to bring a Dispeller because I don't think I need it anymore, you're not going to hex me because I have Magic Resistance 2 on all my units, well, then I'm going to have a big Rude Awakening for you when I use a Demonic Vessel Gore block that has like 30 attacks that are Strength 5 and AP 1. And they just shred everything to death in one turn, which I've done a few
Yeah,
times.
there's some truth to that.
Right. But
Yeah. Yeah.
the big topic of discussion is elementalism. And just to explain real fast, Earth and Ramparts was already a good spell, and then the latest FAQ that changed a million things about the game kind of made people lose their minds, because if Earthen Ramparts works just like any other low layer obstacle, and it says you're not in base contact with the other unit when you have a wall between you and them, does that mean that when a spell is cast on Earthen Ramparts on a unit that they can only make one attack, and only one attack per model can be made against them because you're not in base contact, or you're making a supporting attack or something? Which of course we find totally ridiculous. That's definitely
You're
not
not playing it that way.
Yeah.
No.
No, and so we don't play it that way. Now, some people are playing it that way, and they're setting it up such that they've got a unit of, let's say, Graveguard, or I mean, they don't have Elementalism, but let's say you've got, like Tomb Guard, right? And they cast Earthen Ramparts on these Tomb Guard, and they're sitting right in front of the Dragon Ogres, and they say, cool, if you want to charge me, each Dragon Ogre gets 1 attack instead of 3, and they don't get to stomp. So you're going to have 3 attacks with your guys, and I'm going to have 20 with mine. Are you sure you want to deal with this situation, right? So if Earthen Ramparts works that way, that's stupidly powerful. But even if it only stops impact hits and stomp attacks, I think those are going to become even more prevalent in the meta now, because you've got people who are trying to run 2 dragons so that one of them can absorb the challenge while the other one gets to get into base contact, right? And then people who are using a lot more chariots, because chariots, when they go into infantry units with the impact hits, just totally swing the combat resolution the other way. I think the chariots are really, really fun and useful. So I think that having Earthen Ramparts is an amazing way to give yourself the ward save and really tech up your list versus pretty much anybody. I mean, almost anybody is going to have something that will be useful against, right?
Yep, for sure. No doubt about it. It's very effective. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months. But I think that you're making some pretty strong cases there, Evan. All right, cool. So that's kind of our high-level summary of what we're seeing right now, the updates for 1.5 with how it impacts Magic. Huge shakeup for the game. I think it's super, super positive. Exciting to see where it goes. I don't think players have solved the new meta yet with all the changes and ripple effects from this. Not even close. So I'm excited to see where that takes us in the upcoming months. Evan, any last words, sir?
Yeah, I have one more thing. There was many times during the weekend where I would really wish that I had Wind Blast, so that I could literally just push someone 2 inches further away from the objective so that I could sit on it instead. And so that's another way that Elementalism is just like, wow, Elementalism is just the answer to everything, yet again. I find that really boring, but I think it is. It's very good.
All right, so with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you all next time.